The Sunrise Community Church bills itself as the weirdest little church in Texas. But among Austin's homeless community, it's a place they know they can always get a meal. Organizers say some 300 people come every weekday. On the day we visited, temperatures hit 43 degrees Celsius. The asphalt hotter than 71.
This one gentleman I hadn't seen before came to us. He was elderly, and his soles of his sneakers had melted into his socks. And it was just, I think, moments before his socks melted into his skin.
At least I'm trying, you know.
Besides the physical agony, Pastor Mark Hilbelink says the excessive heat is also taking a mental toll.
I think psychologically is actually where you see the biggest impact of climate change, because I think just like you and I, when we get to the end of September, it's not necessarily that it's hotter than it was in June, but psychologically it feels more draining.
Paul Esquidil knows what that's like firsthand. He's been living in a tent for the past 6 years. A tent, he says, that has now become a hot box.
Your mind just goes crazy. I've never been in war, but you feel like you have. Like you're fighting the weather. You're going to a war. It's only you. You gotta get ready, be prepared.
Research on the effects of long-term exposure to extreme heat is still in the early stages, but accumulating evidence shows it is linked to an increase in violence, aggression, psychiatric hospitalizations, even suicide.
So you can't deal with your own emotions perhaps as calmly as you could if you were cooler. And so when you start getting too hot, at some very basic instinctive level, you're fighting to keep yourself alive.
Repeat exposure to extreme weather can be particularly detrimental to the nearly 600,000 homeless people in the U.S., 20% of whom are already suffering from a serious mental illness, according to the National Alliance on Mental Health. Making matters worse, research has shown that psychoactive drugs may make people more vulnerable to the heat.
We see increased rates of kind of mortality among people who have previous mental health conditions when they're in hot conditions.
Like I said,
For Paul Esquidil, climate change is now an inescapable enemy.
and when that summer's over, that game's over. Now we gotta play the next game. That's the winter game. It's a game, and you have to be good at it. If you're not good at it, it's gonna take over your mind.
Scientists say the intensity, frequency, and duration of this year's summer heat are just a snapshot of the future. And while more research is needed to understand the relationship between extreme heat and mental well-being, one thing is already clear. Climate change is impacting not just our environments, but our minds as well. Toni Waterman, CGTN, Austin, Texas.